I want to bring in North Carolina Republican Congressman Mark Harris this morning to talk more about the situation in the Middle East. Congressman, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing well, and even better that you're joining us now. I want to get right into it because the president making some remarks not too long ago saying he's unhappy with Israel. He's unhappy with Iran, saying that Israel dropped the biggest load that we've seen. He's urging both of them to come to the table. What's your take on the situation in the Middle East and the United States' involvement?
Well, I think it's obvious from the president's comments today that he's obviously frustrated with the actions in that final hour leading up to the ceasefire. And since then, they've kind of gone back and forth. And even just in the last few minutes, a statement was put out by, I guess, the Iranian foreign minister or someone that heads up their nuclear program. So there's still a whole lot of things that are going to need to be worked out. I think there's no question the president took the steps that he felt was necessary, and I'm very supportive of that, and feel like the American people recognize that he went in to just kind of finish the job, that Israel did not have the ability without those bunker buster bombs to really get to those three critical areas that needed to be hit. So I think the president stepped up, did what needed to be done. He has continued right on the backside of that, as everybody noticed, working diligently for peace and a ceasefire. And as of late yesterday, thought that we had something in place. And still yet, I believe something may continue to work out, but there's still work to be done for sure.
And Congressman, we've heard you say before that no one wants a nuclear Iran. How do you talk to your constituents that aren't on the same page, maybe with your ideas and beliefs, and being more present with this conflict with Israel and Iran? What do you say to those constituents and to help them understand where we are, where we could be, and where this goes from here?
Well, I think when you recognize that Iran for 46 years has really terrorized the Middle East in so many ways. I mean, I made a comment yesterday that it really is going to take a continued education of the American public on just all of the ways that Iran has been that bad player in the midst of the Middle East, and from attacking ships to attacking our troops to various ways that they have worked to create instability in that region. And even to the point that yesterday, I mean, when you saw them firing missiles at Qatar, I mean, that's their own neighbor there trying to hit American bases. And Saudi Arabia came out very strong condemning those. Qatar came out very strong condemning those. So I think that we're looking for stability in the Middle East. I think that President Trump has stepped up to the plate. Israel took the first step that needed to be done. Of course, they're right there in the backyard, and they really wanted to make sure that they were not threatened by a group that continues to say death to Israel, death to America. They want to drive Israel into the sea. All of those things just pointed to this was action that needed to be done. I feel like they've taken out the nuclear capabilities of Iran, but it's obviously going to have to be monitored. They're going to have to be maintained to make sure that they don't get a program up and running again. So I think all of these are important matters. I feel like President Trump has shown leadership that the American people have been looking for. And I think back to the times over the years when there were special movements that our commander-in-chief called for that made an incredible difference in our world. And I think you saw that happen on Saturday evening.
Well, and Congressman, to your point about learning what exactly did happen over the weekend with taking out those nuclear facilities, Congress is set to get an intelligence briefing later on today. What are you hoping to learn from that?
Well, one of the things I'm hoping to learn is just how effective these strikes were. And I don't know that they're going to have full answers for us quite yet in this briefing, but I'm very anxious to just know that indeed where we struck has certainly put Iran out of the nuclear weapons business. And I'm very anxious to hear that report. And obviously, this is a very fluid situation, as we've seen even this morning. So I hope we get it'll be this afternoon when we receive this briefing. I hope that there'll be some up-to-date information on how this ceasefire is going and the conversations that are going into it.
Congressman, you have been an advocate for veterans. Your dad served in World War II. It's something you speak about often there. What do you say to your constituents that are worried, saying, okay, we saw the ceasefire in place, we saw the ceasefire possibly go away, and they're worried that we may be sending American troops over there at some point if the conflict escalates? What do you say to them that have worries about sending American boys and girls over there?
Well, I think the president has made it clear that that is really not part of the equation, has not been part of the equation. This was a strike that we took, a one-off strike, obviously to try to take out, that was the goal all along, was to take out their nuclear capabilities and make sure they were not able to get that enriched uranium to be able to put a nuclear head on a missile. We wanted to make sure that didn't happen. So those things are taking place. The president hasn't really had any conversation that I know of about troops on the ground, boots on the ground. That's not part of the equation at all. Israel obviously has stepped up to take care of their neighbor. We came along to help our partner Israel, our key ally in that part of the country, to finish what they didn't have the equipment to be able to do. And I trust they'll be able to continue. So the U.S. is not looking for a further war. In fact, I think that's one reason we're trying to be careful about using the term regime change, because any regime change does not need to be done by America coming in and trying to set up a government, because that only leads us to being entangled like we have seen before in the situations in the Middle East. But this is something, if there is regime change to happen, it's going to have to come from the Iranian people. And they have to make that call. They have to step up and do what they need to do to form their own government. And so this is something that right now continuing to be monitored closely, but I don't anticipate boots on the ground, certainly at this point.
Well, and just, hearing you say that, obviously we're hoping that necessarily doesn't happen either. If it's a big if, we know there's a lot of military manufacturing, a lot of logistics companies in District 8 in North Carolina that have these federal contracts, defense contracts. If something were to happen and escalate and we have more involvement than what we thought as of this Tuesday, how do you have those conversations with those companies? Do you ready them? Do you prepare them? We know there could be a trickle-down effect just to North Carolina.
Well, I think what everybody saw over the weekend is that the United States military is the superior power in the world. A message was sent across the globe on Saturday night. When you consider the precision with which that was done, our U.S. military is incredible. And all preparations are always being made for our defense. Preparations are always being made for when moments like what happened Saturday developed. So I have no question that our Department of Defense, I have no question that their contractors and all of those that they interact with are well aware and will be kept well aware of the situation to be prepared for whatever may come. But the reality is that defense isn't something that just happens at just a moment. Those are the things that we see on television. Those are the pictures that we're seeing even right now. But the preparation for all of that is an ongoing day-to-day task and the work that is being accomplished. And again, hats off to all of our military who were willing to step up and do what they did. I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard of a situation where a B-2 bomber goes in without a shot fired at it and comes out without a shot fired at it and accomplishes their task. Again, hats off to the United States military that continue to be the superior fighting force in the world.
Again, Congressman Mark Harris joining us this morning. Congressman, we appreciate you taking the time to not only speak to us, but also speak to your constituents and let them know what's going on in the nation's capital. Congressman, again, thank you.
Always a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you for what you do.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.